I guess let's just jump in. Ryan Michler, Order of Man Podcast and Movement. What's up, dude? Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to our
Yeah, man.
conversation.
I've been following you for a while. I mean, not blowing sunshine here. I think what you're doing is timely. I really do. And I don't know if if I'm just reading the tea leaves wrong, but I feel like folks like you and others are reading the same tea leaves. So before we jump in, I guess you obviously you started this whole movement. It's more than just a podcast. I think you would agree with that. What's the problem? What are you trying to solve? What's the problem as you see it?
When I started, there wasn't some big global issue or problem that I was working towards or against. Ultimately, I just wanted to help give men the tools they needed to thrive. Yeah. I know I was struggling in my marriage and in my business and looking for ways to grow my business and connect with a deeper, more meaningful relationship with my wife and children. So I felt like a podcast would be a powerful opportunity for me to talk with men that I admired and respected. Yeah. And we started in March of 2015, so very close to 6-year anniversary now. And I never would have thought that it would have turned into this. And, as I've talked with men and masculinity and manliness and what all of that means, I've seen some outside circumstances that need to be addressed that a lot of men are dealing with. But I try not to paint ourselves into the victim corner. That's very popular these days, is everybody's out to get everybody else. And if you can paint yourself as a victim, then, it's not that we're victims. It's that, I guess we're victims of ourselves mostly. We make dumb decisions as men and we mess up and we have egos and pride and we let that get in the way and we don't reach out for help. We don't offer help. We don't have fathers in our lives. We don't father the way that we should. So a lot of what we experience as men is self-inflicted, quite frankly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would share your similar story. I mean, I think you shared a little bit of your personal story on a few of your podcasts, but yeah, having that father figure is critical. And whether they're physically there or not is one thing, but sometimes they're physically there, but not there. The rest of them's not there. My dad, Vietnam
definitely.
vet, he was physically there a lot. I mean, came home every night, mostly, but he was in another place a lot. We lived that residual, the residual effects of that shitstorm that was the Vietnam War, and he never shed it really, and we felt it firsthand. So yeah, that and he was a great father in a lot of ways, but he had his demons, and they never, they were prevalent. That's all I'll say. They were prevalent. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the maybe more traditional way of doing things was to just lock that stuff up inside and go at it alone and not discuss these issues. And actually, I believe there are some merits to that because at times we need to be the leader and we need to be the emotional beacon or rock or the foundation of what our family or community or neighbors or employees are dealing with. But then there's also times and moments where we do need to shed some of that and get to the root of the issues that we might be dealing with outside of some sort of addiction to drugs or alcohol or some other method of sedation and really figure out why we feel the way that we do, why we behave and think the way that we do so we can create new patterns and new ways of looking at life and be more effective for ourselves and others.
Yeah, I think it is that balance, right? I think you just touched on it. And we'll get into the attack on masculinity a little bit, and just because that one bugs me to all. I mean, just bugs the hell out of me. But you kind of touched on something that's important, that balance, right? You used to in the 40s and 50s, you had that strong silent type. You see to the moon, Alice, right? I mean, imagine a TV show now where the husband's raising his fist like he's going to pop his wife in the face. Like it would just never fly, right? Probably nor should it. I mean, right? Yeah. I think that's the stuff we need to leave behind. But yet there are times then you just need that traditional masculine trait, whether for leadership, the stoicism, whatever ism you want to put on it. And that's kind of, I think, some of the notes that I had sent you was like, how do we balance, and I think you'd be the perfect person to ask, how do we balance that really? Where we gotta progress, right? Right. Progressivism has it's all overloaded terms, and it's got a certain political spin now. But just check that at the door for a second. We need to all progress, especially in your area. You're trying to help men progress, to be better men. How do we leave some of that old baggage behind, where maybe, hey, we shouldn't have been living that sort of life that maybe society accepted 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever it might be. But at the same time, bring some of those solid, more traditional masculine traits forward be a better husband, be a good leader, et cetera, et cetera. Where's that balance? How do we do that?
I think you look at your results, and you consider what it is you're after. And here's what most men are after. They want some money in the bank account. They want to live happy and fulfilled lives. They want to have great intimacy and sex with their wives. Right. They want to be deeply connected with their children. They want to find a career endeavor that's meaningful and significant to them. They want to feel and be strong. They want to look good when they look at themselves in the mirror after they get out of the shower. I mean, these are the things that we want. So in order to have those things, you just have to work backwards. What do I want? Okay, here's the end result. Now, how do I work backwards? And then what we need to constantly do, and I think that we haven't always been good at this, and I'm not always great at this either, but we need to evaluate our progress. And I don't think a whole lot of guys are doing that. Yeah. You think about what most men are inundated with on a daily basis. They get up with just enough time to get ready for the day, grab maybe a quick bite, or run by the coffee shop on the way into work and grab a coffee, go into work, do their thing. They're inundated with tasks and assignments and projects that aren't theirs. They're not passionate about. They come home, they get bombarded by the kids and the wife, and that's not necessarily bad, but that's what happens. And then when the kids go to bed, him and his wife gets on the phone and they check out, or they watch a movie, and then they go to sleep with too little sleep, and they do it all over again. It's like, where in your day is there any amount of time to be thoughtful about whether or not you are producing the results that you want? I was first introduced to this concept by Robert Kiyosaki, I believe it was, when he wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I believe it was him who talked about the rat race. And I was in the rat race.
Amen. Yeah.
I was so inundated with growing my business and building my financial planning practice. And while I was doing that, and I had told myself I'm doing the quote unquote right things, the things a man should do, I was alienating my wife. I wasn't connected with my 1-year-old son at the time. And it wasn't any wonder to me now, looking back, why I was producing less than favorable results. So I really had to figure out a way to carve out some time throughout the day and analyze whether the work I was doing on myself, on my business, on my relationships were actually working or they weren't. And I realized and identified some things that were working well and identified some things that weren't. And we make those adjustments and pivots, but only if you give yourself the time and the space to be able to be reflective and think about these things.
Yeah, that self-reflection is key. Now you sound like a lot of men aren't like that. I think they just aren't self-reflective by nature. I mean, is that part of what you're trying to get men to do? I mean, are you sure? I mean, I remember someone told me a while ago, it's like, hey, if you look at my calendar is a disaster. I mean, it's an absolute disaster. My full-time job is just, it's from when you're conscious in the morning to when you can stay conscious till the end of the day. Like, the work will just keep coming, right? I work with the DoD, the Navy. Mm-hmm. It's all wonderful stuff. I mean, it's a great community. I mean, I have my complaints, of course, like any job, but it's, for all intents and purposes, it's a wonderful thing, right? It just it couldn't get better. That some folks would look at it and go, "What are you complaining about?" But you do have to draw those boundaries. So, someone had said to me, I don't know, it was a blog I had read, or I'm very much into self-help type stuff. One reason I found you was kind of just searching for things. I don't know what the keywords I searched for, but it was sort of like, look at your work calendar. It's everything you do, starting at 0800 to 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock to whatever it might be, 9 o'clock. Every minute is kind of is more or less accounted for on a calendar. What does your personal calendar look like? Have dinner with the wife. Have intimate time with the wife. Tell the kids to go downstairs, leave mom and dad alone, and for the hour, or hang out with your daughter for this hour. Tell your son to go play. Take your son out to the movie, whatever it might be. Like, what does that look like? And you look at it and you go, shit.
I actually don't calendar that stuff into my day because those are my priorities. Like, I don't need. You don't calendar brushing your teeth into your day. Like, you don't calendar.
Yeah.
You don't calendar things that are important to you into your day because it's just your day, So,
yeah, that's a good point. No, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, most of my calendar consists of my business meetings, things like this, podcast calls, other podcasts that I'm on, or meetings that I have. But I try to be very sporadic. Sometimes I feel guilty because I don't work as hard as maybe I think I should in the business, but as soon as you and I are done right here, my son and I are going to go work on our canoe in the basement, and that's how my afternoon is going to be spent. I might have to take a call here or there, or somebody might message me or something like that. But for the most part, I try to do as little work as possible and be fully engaged and present at home, which is a completely different perspective and point of view than I've had over, the past 12, almost 13 years of having children now at this point.
Well, interesting. I mean, so how do you balance that? Because you're obviously, I mean, I followed you for a while. From the outside looking in, you're extremely driven. You're not someone that just wants to work a little meaningless little job and just be with the family all day and not generate income and build that outside, platform. What's the balance there? Or is it just keeping your priorities in check and then let it fall as it may?
Well, I think you're maybe working on a little bit of a false premise here, in that in order to be driven, you have to be career driven. Like, I'm just as motivated and ambitious and driven with my family. I have family goals and aspirations that I want to accomplish with them, and go on vacations and connect and spend time with them. So, it is very easy for men to believe that if we're doing it right, we're driven, we're ambitious, we're motivated, but it all seems to be centered around career and money. Yep. And certainly that's important. That's how we put a roof over the head and food on the table and have the experiences. Certainly that's a priority. But I found that the more that I can be present and engage with my family, then the other stuff takes care of itself, because I'm focused on only the work that is producing the results. If I have 12 hours a day that I can be in the business, and I've got 12 hours to fill, well, I'm going to find things to do, whether they're productive or not, for 12 hours of my day. If, on the other hand, I think to myself, I've got 5 hours and I've got to crank this out in 5 hours, because at 5 hours, I'm going to go spend time with my family, do a tea party with my daughter, build a canoe with my son, whatever it is we're doing, then I've just shortened my work window. And now I'm forced to choose what are the most productive activities that I can do. Right. And this is completely counter to the way a lot of people view work and life, and we're inundated with the Insta gurus and celebs who are telling you to hustle and grind 24/7. And I'm like, that sounds miserable.
Yeah, that is the...
I want to do something with focused, concerted effort for a short period of time, so that I can go do something else focused and concerted for a short period of time. So, it is a balance. It's hard to find the happy medium, but let's look at what the act of balancing is anyways. So what most people think is that what we're dancing around here is the term work-life balance, right? Everybody talks about that. What's the work-life balance? And when they say it, the way that they say it, and the way that I know a lot of people view it, is that once you find the perfect percentage, maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 80-20 or 60-40, but whatever that perfect percentage is, once you find it and establish it, then everything's going to take care of itself. But that's not what balance actually is. So let's take surfing or snowboarding. And you catch this wave, right? And you stand up and you jump on your board with your feet. And then you have friction, right? You have the wave, and it's moving, and it's rolling, and it's going left, and it's going right, and it's doing different things. And then what is your body doing as the wave is moving? You're making micro adjustments. You're shifting your weight forward, backwards, moving your left foot back, right foot forward, et cetera, et cetera. You're making thousands and thousands of micro adjustments almost instantaneously.
Continually, yeah.
And that's what keeps you balanced on the board, so you ride the wave and then you do it over again. That's how I look at life, and this idea, this concept of work-life balance. Sometimes I'm going to have to work my ass off because that's what the business requires, and other times I get to take it a little bit easy and throttle back and spend more time with the family, or one of my children might be dealing with something difficult, and so I'm not going to do a podcast that day. I'm going to spend time with them. Or my wife wants to take the kids down to Portland, and so we're going to go down there and do that for the day. It's just micro adjustments along the way. There is no homeostasis where once you find it, everything's perfect. It's constant balancing and adjusting.
Right. Yeah, I heard someone had referred to it as, stop saying work-life balance, just call it life. Sometimes in life you're working on your business. Sometimes you're working on your family. Sometimes you're working on you. I mean, it's called life. Right.
Sure.
So I like that analogy, that surfing analogy. You don't just adjust once in these discrete patterns and wait.
I mean, how long would you last on that wave? You'd crash and wipe out and get pummeled.
You bite it immediately. Yeah. Interesting. Now, what would you say to men listening to you? Like, well, Ryan, I mean, on a Friday, you're just going to stop at noon and build a canoe with your son. Well, that must be nice. I'm on the job site all day. I can't leave. Like, what do you mean? I work 8, 9, 10 hours.
It is nice. Yeah. I mean, That's a phrase I hear occasionally, like, "Oh, it must be nice to do this and that." Yeah, it is nice, but I've created it. It's not like this just kind of happened, because I used to be that guy who I didn't take any weekends off, and I was working late at night. I was working Saturdays and Sundays, and sometimes we just have to put in the grind, especially when we're younger. I'm getting older now, so we've done a lot of work up to this point to get me to this stage. But again, that comes back to, is the work that you're doing actually moving the needle? Is it, like, if you go in, let's say you're a construction worker, and if you believe that your job is to physically build a house, and that's how you view success, then you will, for the rest of your life, swing a hammer for the rest of your life until your body says no more, because that's how you view success. If, on the other hand, you're a construction worker, a contractor, and you don't view success as building a house, but you view success as having houses built, then maybe you start thinking about, okay, well, I'm a contractor, so maybe I'm doing tile work. Well, can I hire my first employee? And what would that look like? Could we double up on our efforts, or could he take this over? Or could I maybe even cherry pick the jobs I'm going to do and sub those out to somebody else? So now you're going to be more reflective, because you've changed what your definition of success is, and you open yourself up to opportunities. Look, I know what it's like to take pride in doing the work yourself, but if that is your mentality, then you will always do it yourself, and you will never have time for anything else. I did the same thing when we started this organization. I did the same thing when we started I called it a mastermind at the time. It's a brotherhood now, because we've got so many men in there. And I felt like I had to do it all, and I had zero time or energy to do anything else. And I realized, well, I've got dozens, hundreds now of men that actually could step up in my place and do just as good, if not better, in some instances than me. So these guys come in, we give them opportunities to lead and to host conversations, and then that frees up my time to build a canoe or spend time with a family or do these other engagements that I'm excited about.
And frankly, you're doing everyone else more of justice, because the organizations are going to thrive more, because you're not the single point of failure, and you're enabling other folks. You're being more of a leader instead of a doer. I think ego gets in the way of that, does it not? Because I felt that my whole life. It's just like,
of course,
slowly just trying not to be the hero, because look at me, I did it. How about you enable others to do it? And then you kind of almost become a cheerleader of those folks. And it's really better for all if you can check the ego at the door. And I think it gets easier as you get older. But for me, in the 20s, 30s, that was hard. 40s now, it's easier. But I reflectively can look back and go, man, to look at someone that I know I could have done that, and I enabled them to do it, and then to say, man, awesome job, you killed it, fantastic. That's hard. It's the right thing to do, but it's hard. But the ego is it's a sneaky one, is it not?
Yeah, it's definitely ego. One thing I hear a lot is, well, like, nobody can do it as good as I can. Well, again, that's ego. Exactly. And also, you're lying to yourself. Like, that's a lie. You're telling me that you can't find another individual out there who's just as good, if not better, than you are at a thing? That's ridiculous.
Then you're not looking.
And so if you tell yourself, oh, I can't find good help, oh, I can't, then of course, you're going to sabotage yourself, even subconsciously, to not find good help and think that you always need to be the one swinging the proverbial hammer. You don't need to be that. And you shouldn't be that. You should be teaching people how to swing the hammer so that they learn. You magnify your time and your efforts. You free it up to do other things. You add value and opportunity to other people's lives, and you make a hell of a lot more money in a fulfilled life. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, that's the way to grow as a human, I think, and as a business. It's no doubt about it. But yeah, you got to overcome that ego thing. That's why leadership is such an important topic. And I know folks that view leadership as, you didn't want to do it yourself, and you just want to make other people do it. And you you take a back seat and just kind of watch everything happen. Like, no, that's not what true leadership is. True leadership is, that's how you grow anything. Truly, you're a leader to your family.
Some people want to do that.
Oh yeah. And I think it's like bad managers, bad anyone that's not hands-on keyboard or swinging the proverbial hammer, to use your words. There's good leaders, and there's just folks that, I'm not doing it. I'm going to be in the back seat, kind of doing nothing, collecting a paycheck. Well, never judge a system by its abusers. I love that term. It's like, well, don't badmouth leadership because of the folks that are abusing the whole leadership thing. But I don't know, man. So getting back to your platform, what you're doing, So do you think that? I mean, is there an attack on masculinity at the moment?
I
Or do
don't
you not
use that
care?
word because no, I care. I mean, I think it's
Mm,
important to be aware of these things and what's happening in society and how society views men and women, femininity, masculinity. I care. I'm just hesitant to use that word because words have
yeah.
meaning, and I don't feel like I'm a victim. I feel like I have tremendous opportunity. I feel like the biggest risk is not how society views me, but how I view myself and the work that I'm willing to do on
Mm,
myself. I mean, that said, there are some things stacked against us. The school system is one. It's not set up for boys. It's set up for young girls and women, which is why you see women pulling ahead just about on every metric in the education system and also with jobs, career aspirations, income, et cetera, et cetera. And again, women aren't the enemy. I think sometimes when you start using the terms attack on
yeah.
masculinity and this kind of thing, then you start looking for, well, who's the enemy?
Right. Who's
Like,
doing the attacking? Right.
and a
Right.
lot of the time, right,
Yeah.
who's doing it, right? And so a lot of the times I've seen a lot of these like men's movements where they think, oh well, it's women are the enemy. No, they're not the enemy. We actually should be working together. That's the goal. So yeah, I think there's some things that are stacked against us. I look at the family court system. I look at the way that society, I should say pop culture, tends to view masculinity. In my book, I wrote something about this. I was talking about the way that I think society views men in a lot of instances, that it's a lot like you go into a building or a hotel and you see that little red box on the wall and it says, in case of emergency, break here. And so you break it and you get the hose or the hammer or the axe. Well, that's kind of the way pop culture views
Mm,
masculinity. Just go over there, sit down and shut up. And, the future is women and all this kind of stuff. And then if we need you, we'll let you know. And then there's an emergency, a natural disaster, a violent
right.
encounter,
Right.
something that, men are exceptional at. And they break the glass and they say, okay, come out. You're welcome to come out. Help us, help us, help us. And then we help. And they're like, okay, good. Problem solved. Go
Mm,
away now.
mm,
Go away now. And it's a shame because now we have this entire generation of young ladies and young men being raised without fathers. We see depression and suicide rates. We see increasing. We see drug abuse and other substance abuse on the rise. We see runaways. We see crime rates. And it's a real travesty that we've bought into the idea that men are only there to serve a very narrow and specific purpose. And outside of that, we're not that useful at all, which is a real
yeah. I
shame.
mean, is this just the swing of the pendulum? I mean, is it? I
Oh,
mean, it's just
sure.
right.
Yeah.
And I think your point about like it has nothing to do with women being on the other side. It really has nothing to do with them, right? It's the and
Mm-hmm.
that's key because that if we were having that narrative right now, like say women were the enemy, all we'd be doing is creating the momentum to start the pendulum going the other way. And then in 20 years, 2 3 decades, we'd be having the same conversation on the other side, right? But I think your point
Yeah.
is, I think your message is on point. Where let's not even. I'd like to even assume whether it's racism or bigotry or whatever the ism is of the day, things we could do to stop the pendulum back and forth, right? Whether it's left versus right politically, there's so much dialogue out there that's strictly just aiding in my head. I just close my eyes and I can see. I'm like, okay, that theme is just pushing the pendulum as hard as you can that way. And then society's going to
Mm-hmm.
overcorrect, save us. Look at all the bad stuff you did to this group over the years, and then, of course with social media and everything else that you just completely amplifies this stuff. You swing then it swings the other way. But messaging as you're talking about it, I want to commend you. That's huge, and you got me thinking about it in a good way. I think that's a better way to address when we feel like. First of all, I like what you said. Attack on that word. Attack is a charged one. Why use it? I like that. The thing.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's a marketing strategy, and that's why when we hear the
Yeah.
media, for example, aggrandize the, let's take racism. Does racism exist? Sure.
Right.
I don't think anybody would deny that. If they look around, I'm sure. Is it as widespread? Is it as systematic? Is it
Yeah.
is it
Yeah.
as large as it's made out to be? No, I don't think so.
I don't either, my
I don't
friend.
think
I don't
so.
either. Nope. I'm right there with you.
But if we can paint it that way, and when I say we, I'm talking about the media. If the media can paint it that way, oh, then we got to listen. Oh, what? And so they create these problems so that people will tune in. And we do that as marketers. You know, I'm a marketer too because I have a business. Right? So we do this as marketers. We just have to be careful. But you know, here's the real issue. The real issue is that we live in a pretty good time. I mean, the absolute best time to be alive in the history of human civilization.
Yep. Agree.
You know, access to healthcare, our lifespans, poverty and wealth. We live in the most incredible technological advancement, the most incredible time that you could ever imagine. And because we don't actually have any real issues, we make up dumb shit to worry about so we feel useful.
Yep.
But there's a better way to feel useful, and that's to actually engage in meaningful challenge. So a lot of guys will say things like, or allude to the fact that if only my problems would go away, you know, if only I didn't have any problems. That's why the lottery is so big, right? If I win the lottery, all my problems will be solved. No, what you actually should be doing instead of worrying about your problems going away is elevating your problems. Like, for example, 8, 9, 10 years ago, I was really worried about how I was going to make the mortgage payment. That was a problem, right? So that consumed me. And that's part of the reason why I had to put in so much work and so much effort so I could make the bills and work multiple jobs and do what I needed to do to be able to make the mortgage payment. Well, now we're in a blessed, fortunate position where that's not an issue. That's not a problem anymore. But I have better problems to worry about. First world problems, things that, you know, like how am I going to employ 10 people and help them pay their mortgages? Right. That's a significantly better problem to have. So I think if we focus less on how do I get rid of my problems and more about how do I elevate my problems as long as they're meaningful and significant, I think we would stop worrying about some of this dumb, idiotic, you know, non-important, trivial nonsense that the media and other entities get us all riled up about.
Right. And the word problem too, I think there's a quote unquote problem with the word problem. Why even look at things that you encounter throughout your day and your life as problems? Okay, got a flat tire. Well, that was just happened, fix it, you go on. I have to work hard today because it's going to be a long day. We got a lot of crap going on at work. That's not a problem. That's your day. Like if you look at all these things as just part of problem solution, and you stop thinking about, well, if I just didn't have this thing, then I would be, no, you have that thing, learn from it, adjust. Maybe if you don't want it again, maybe the things you do to not have that thing again. But I look at that, I mean, like you're learning from things that are occurring. And if you even just don't look at them as problems, I had this conversation with my wife even last week, a couple weeks ago now, but it was like, if all these things that we just encounter, you know, and I credit the Harvard Business Review they wrote a book a while ago called The Business Cycle. I read it, man, it must have been 30 years ago now, 20 years ago, whatever it was. And it really was like basically most businesses fail because they don't plan for failure the proper way. Everyone says, you can fail a little bit, and then most of them just give up. When they have that first horrible quarter or whatever it is, they can't recover. And it's not even really a planning thing as it is more of a mindset where if you just said, I'm going to start a business and in 10 years I have a goal of being at some spot, there's going to be some really, 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 really hard times and good times. If you just let that kind of do this, and as long as the net trend is positive, you're crushing it, right? Don't let it's investing, right? The same, you see all these curves, right? When you're down here, it's just part of the thing. Now, if you're doing this and the trend is negative, okay, you got to look at something. But and it's kind of a micro example of looking at everything you encounter in life. Is just, my boss did this, my wife wasn't happy. It's like, okay, well, these are problems. Well, can you learn from it and move on and stop calling them problems? I think, to go back to your point, words are meaningful and they're important. Maybe call them, I don't know what the word would be, but problem has such a negative tone. It's like
challenges.
Right.
I mean,
challenges are cool.
I personally I don't mind the word problems. Because I look at it like this. I look at it as, take for example, in school, you have a math problem. Do you just sit there and stare at it and not do anything with it? No, you solve it.
Right.
Like you figure out the variables and you figure out the equation and you use some critical thinking and then you solve it and then you move on and then you have a better problem to solve. So problems are there to be solved. Like that's why they exist. And it's your job to solve them. So I don't care what term you use, just as long as you're framing it correctly. If you're looking at it as a problem and that word as an issue for you, and it keeps you from going, then yeah, call it a
Right.
challenge or call it
Right.
something
Right.
else. But it's really the meaning and the framing that we give the words that we use that is actually
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Your mindset is will trump any any linguistic you attach to that thing, right? Yeah. Yeah. Now
Sure.
you touched on
Yeah.
something. You touched on something about we don't have the problems that maybe prior generations had. So we're kind of getting we're creating them. And I love this quote. And I had to look it up. I heard the quote before. I didn't know who it was from, but hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And it kind of it kind of gets to what you were talking about, basically, where we don't really have the problems that we could have, so we create stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why people criticize masculinity.
Yep.
Is they live, we all, I should say 99.5 or more percentage of the population live in an environment where they can actually complain about the very traits and characteristics that gave them the right to
Right.
do so. So, like, what a beautiful thing that you can complain about masculinity when, frankly, it's masculinity that built the environment where you're safe and comfortable enough to complain about
Right.
it.
Right. Yeah. How dare you, sir, with that logic?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
get it, like, because what people do is they're going to look at, I mean, what do we do as humans? We're always looking for these problems and these challenges, right? Because why? They represent a threat, right? So we've been hardwired to look for threat. Why? Because we want to
Survival.
stay
Yeah,
alive.
survival.
That's it. We want to really, at the foundation of what we want to do as a species is we want to stay alive and we want to multiply. And that's it.
Yep.
Everything else is probably in some degree, to achieve that end. Why do I want to make a bunch of money? Well, I would say to have experiences and to raise kids and do all this. Again, it's to stay alive. If I'm wealthy and I have a house and I have security and I live in a safe neighborhood and I have these things, then I'm safer. My family's safer. If I build relationships with other individuals, there's strength and power in numbers and community, so I'm safer. And then I want to have children, again, replenishing the earth, multiplying the earth. This is what we want.
That's
So,
right into us. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. No, no
course.
doubt about it. I mean, now, so I kind of take this when I was looking through some of your material, and I was like, well, I feel like, I've always been a little bit on edge about, the what I see as like, the gender thing now, and boys don't, everything that boys learn is socially constructed. And, it's like, I've always had that struggle of, trying to remain compassionate with folks that believe the opposite of what I do, but at the same time standing my ground, saying, no, there are biological differences, okay? Doesn't mean if you want to do X, Y, and Z on your side and transition all this new stuff that's happening, I wouldn't love you any less, but that doesn't mean we change the underlying foundation of what is. With that, in mind, I kind of did a little reading, and I'm like, okay, is this whole... Okay, go back to the attack on masculinity thing. How real is it? Is it really a threat? Is there, is it really a problem, or is it just there a narrative out there that making it a problem? So one thing that concerned me is, and I want to read you something from, in fact, I did a podcast with a gentleman a while ago, and he actually wrote the article, which is why it came up on my feed. But the American Psychological Association, right, the AMA, in 2018, they wrote. They updated they wrote a what do they call it? A guideline for psychological practice with boys and men, right? It's the first time they've ever done something like that, 2018. Let me just read this to you. I'd like to get your reaction. The main thrust of subsequent research is that traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful. Men socialized in this way are less likely to be engaged in healthy behaviors. Now, that's the American Psychological Association, which basically most psychiatrists, clinical psychologists that are helping folks get through problems would ascribe to. So where that worries me is, now, to be fair, I didn't dig through the actual posted article. There might be a lot of other positives in there that kind of pull that theme to the other side a little bit, but that one message, I think, it's a little concerning, because if you're whatever, you're going through some family issues, you bring your family to help, to get a therapist. I think talking to folks, professionals, is a good thing for all of us. If that's going to be their beginning their initial stance on the whole thing, that worries me a little bit, because now you mentioned the schools being a little bit of a problem, and now you got the folks, the doctors, quote unquote, that are going to be helping us and guiding us with that as their backdrop of professional advice. That's got to be a little concerning, is it not?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that
Okay.
American Psychological Association guide or study that they did, and yeah, it's flawed. It's so flawed, and it's dangerous. Not only is it concerning, it's dangerous. This is the foundation for the way that psychological help is administered across the country and across the world, frankly. So what are therapists if this is what they're learning, what are they going to be teaching our young men? So let's say you have a young man he's got the testosterone pumping through his veins, and he's trying to figure himself out and how to manage this testosterone, and he's feeling aggression, and he's feeling competitiveness, and he has some attention, I won't say issues, but he can't maintain focus as well as maybe a young woman would be able to at his same age. And so all of a sudden, just inherently, he's wrong. And so what do? We either go to therapy and tell him why all the things that he's doing is wrong, and so he feels shitty about who he is as an inherent male, and or we medicate him, right? So we got to, there's something wrong with this kid. He's aggressive, he's physical, he can't focus on this one thing. He won't sit down in his chair. He wants to be outside playing. So let's just pump him full of medication. And we know how bad the prescription epidemic is, the medication epidemic that we're dealing with. We know how bad that is. And we don't fully understand what these drugs are doing to people. So yeah, it's dangerous to assume. I mean, I'm asking this rhetorically because I think but I would like somebody to tell me what's wrong with being stoic. And let me explain what stoicism is, because there's some misconception. People tend to believe that stoicism is the lack of emotion. That's not actually what stoicism is. If you spent any time thinking about or studying, pondering, reviewing what stoicism is, it's actually the quest to understand what your emotions are so you can make better decisions. Yeah. Emotions are simply a metric. They're not the only metric. They're a metric to evaluate if things are working well or aren't working well in your life. So when I say stoicism, I'm not telling any man not to be emotional. I'm saying understand what your emotions are saying and then make better decisions moving forward. Tell me what's wrong with being competitive. Here's a great example. Anybody who's been treated by a physician or gone to the hospital recently or gone through cancer treatments or any number of things that they could be dealing with, it's competition that actually created a lot of those technologies that kept you alive. There's nothing wrong with competition. What's wrong with being dominant? Okay, dominance. I want to be the best at what I do. Does that drive me to excel? Does that drive me to care for other people? Does that drive me to engage and work together with other people or to add value into people's lives, because that's how it's going to help me be dominant? There's this thing about the power struggle, right? That any time somebody wants to get ahead, it's just to get power. And they look at it as a negative. It's not negative. It can be wielded negatively. You can start treating people wrong. You could take advantage of people. Sure, that stuff happens. But being dominant, the desire to perform, is not inherently bad. It's just how you use it, how to utilize it. And so what we need as a society is men who understand emotions, who understand aggression and dominance and competitiveness, and have harnessed it to create effective outcomes for themselves and for their people, their family, neighbors, community members, employees, clients, et cetera, et cetera. And we need those men to teach the young men who are dealing with the same issues and wondering how to harness all of that. They need to teach them how to do that. But if you don't allow that to happen, then what we have is a civilization of Lord of the Flies happening. Sure. Where all the boys are like running around and nobody's instructing them and how to harness all of that. And then that's obviously going to create some horrific ramifications. If you look at the profiles of these young boys who have perpetuated and committed these horrible atrocities with mass shootings, an overwhelming majority of them have a lack of a father figure in their life who's coaching them, instructing them, guiding them, disciplining them, and teaching them how to harness their masculinity.
Yeah, man. There's nothing I can critique about what you just said. I think it was awesome. Seriously, you touched on the medication thing. I think a lot of the mass shootings, a lot of folks are on medication. I think, and I don't know that for sure, but I think a lot.
Right,
of those,
because because society has said there's something wrong with them. And maybe, look, I'm not going to say there isn't mental issues. Certainly, there's people with mental instabilities and issues that need to be dealt with and addressed. But not every little variant in attention span means that somebody is, ill or mentally unstable.
No, totally with you. I mean, yeah, I just think it takes, like you said earlier. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. Is sort of, and I guess, and I like to believe a lot of these policies and whatnot are they start from a foundation of compassion, concern, and then they sort of go off the rails a little bit. I want to think that I don't usually subscribe to the whatever, some left wing or right wing thing, and it's an organized coup against the other side, and we want to turn all genders to just be neutral, and there's no masculinity anymore. I don't want to think that, but in these cases where what we just talked about, I think we need to call out and continue to call out, like you just articulated, when there's major holes in some of these premises and some of these doctrines, if you will, or guidelines, and it's going to be, in a lot of ways, it will serve as the foundation for young folks and young men, especially boys that may be seeing these therapists. It's sort of like their foundation, and obviously, a father figure in the home could solve all of that, right? It's like, okay, well, okay, like, because I always say, and I think you described this as well, whatever society's doing, the government, the president, he might be a super left winger, might be a super right winger. Does it really affect my life that much? It really doesn't. If inside my four walls, they can stay out, let me do my thing in my four walls, and with a solid foundation, I think that can trump most things, most things. I really do think that, once they get out there, I think the policies of the day and the social mantras of the day, I think matter a lot less if that and what you have in your four walls is solid. But it's hard because going back to what you said when we started this discussion is that's where we all need to be better. I'll put myself in that camp where if I'm waking up at 5 a.m., leaving, getting to the office before the sun comes up, coming home stressed after the sun comes down, having a few drinks, passing out, that's not healthy. Right. I found myself now. I don't. That's not my normal day to day. I don't subscribe to that. But I find myself. I found myself in that rat race a little bit. That feeling. It's like, yeah, this is on a road to nowhere. So, and then if you start down that path, what you're building within your four walls no longer is solid. So then you need what's outside the four walls to help and do the right thing. And I don't trust that at all. I just don't. Because just these guidelines, for example, are just one example of that.
Well, nobody can, here, I should say it this way. Nobody should do a better job with managing your life than yourself, and it's a shame that other people, they do, and other people need other people because they won't, most likely it's won't, or in some cases they can't do it for themselves. I do believe that political decisions impact us personally, and we need to be aware of those things, and we need to combat against the things that are an issue. I do believe that. But yeah, I think there certainly the emphasis needs to be placed on managing your own space before you worry about managing others.
Yeah. I think it matters less than we think. There's some key, of course, there's always these key, items that you may ascribe to whatever your belief systems are. There's probably some core ones that if the political party of the day is doing the exact opposite, right? That's going to be a concern, and it should be. But I think I feel like most of them are, taxes are going to go up when the left gets in, okay, and then they're going to go down. And the two-party system is not perfect, but it's pretty freaking awesome. I'm so lucky. I think you would say the same. And you served as well, correct? You served the military.
I did.
Thank you for your service, by the way. Army or what? I forgot.
Army National Guard.
Mm-hmm. Things like that. I'm sure you have a perspective that other folks don't. Just having served your country. And actually, so let's jump there for real quick. So what do you think about, don't know where I got this question. I think you had talked about it with one of your guests, but or maybe not. But your thoughts on U.S. citizens serving a year or two mandatory service. And I've heard that proposed, off the cuff, and
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a good idea. Like, why would I want people who don't want to be there or aren't qualified to be there to serve and defend and protect our way of life? Like, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
I think having a volunteer fighting force it's created the best military fighting force that we've ever known, and it's created a lot of the prosperity that we are capable of enjoying today. So I'd rather focus on raising sons and daughters who understand the history, the accurate history of our nation, who believe in the core values. And look, I know we haven't always lived up to our core values and founding documents, but those are the documents that pave the way for the society in which we've created today.
Yep.
So I want young sons and daughters who understand the power of this country, who understand the power of the founding documents that have established our way of life, and will willingly and voluntarily fight to defend it. But yeah, if we run around and we begin, even more so than we already are, to perpetuate the idea that America is inherently evil and the founding fathers were horrible men and you should be ashamed of your history, and then yeah, it's obvious that we're going to have less people who want to stand up and fight for the ideals that they've been taught incorrectly, inaccurately. Right. So it's a real danger, and that's why I have an increasingly difficult time with the public school system. And it's part of the reason that we homeschool our children, because I don't want them to be indoctrinated to these false ideals and this horrible way of looking at our nation's great history. And I'm not whitewashing any of what's happened. We've done horrible things. We've made horrible mistakes, but we're on the path to improving and fixing those things. And it's our founding fathers and the founding documents that have led the way for us to be able to rectify some of these situations.
Right. Yeah, going back to,
but that's good. That's worth fighting
100%, for. Right. And it's those folks, their ability to say, to disparage the founding fathers, their ability to say that and not getting locked up
because the founding fathers, right? Because the founding fathers sacrificed everything to help move the needle in that direction.
The hypocrisy there is sometimes mind-boggling, but it is what it is. I mean, yeah. So we got about 10, 15 minutes here left. 10 minutes left. Tell me more about your platform. I know you got more than just a podcast. So why do you need? So every man listening, why do they need you? Why do they need to jump on board?
Look, I'm not going to sell what we do. I mean, if guys feel like they need some improvement and need to figure out some tools and strategies to enhance their life, occasionally I will get emails like, "Why should I listen?" And look here, I'm not here to sell you. Like if you feel like you want to improve and get better in your life and connect with your kids and connect with your wife and get in shape and make more money, then maybe we have some tools that you'd be able to utilize. And that's what I'm trying to do. But I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to tell you your way is right or wrong. I'm just here to tell you that here's some things I've tried in my life. Here's some things that my guests, which I've interviewed now, just about 320 highly successful men. Here's what we've done. We've created the platform where hundreds, if not thousands of men are all now banding together and working together and holding each other accountable. So if you feel like you want to improve your life and you want to get better and you want some camaraderie and brotherhood and accountability, then maybe we have what might help on that path. But I'm always very cautious of trying to convince somebody they need to do it a certain way, because I'm just not arrogant enough to believe that my way is right and true and the only way to go about doing things.
Yeah. Humility, usually the way to go. But
I try to be. I'm not always.
Yeah,
but I do try to be humble.
I think we're very similar. I mean, humility is important, but you need to be confident yet humble, right? And then some days you're going to fail at everything. It's just always trying to be better and be self-reflective and call yourself on your own bullshit. Honestly, if we could call ourselves on our own bullshit more, I think we'd all be better people. And I just talking to you a little bit here, I think you're one of those people, because there's a lot of bullshit in all of us. I mean, men are particularly bullshitters sometimes.
Of course. Well, I think it comes back to that ego
Yeah.
thing. And one of the most dangerous things that we can do is lie to ourselves. You know, we all lie to others, but we lie to ourselves. We lie about our own performance. We lie about how good we are and what we're doing and the work we're
Yeah.
doing. We lie about our motives and intentions. And all of that just creates a false reality that doesn't allow us to improve because we aren't looking at the situation honestly with what is going on. You know, like, could you imagine if you were on a football team, you know, you're preparing to play, you know, the Bills or something, and then now you're going to play the Buccaneers. Like, like you gotta, like, how's that going to work?
Right.
You know, you have to actually be objective in your analysis of how you're performing so that you can actually come up with a game plan that will help you thrive and succeed.
Yeah, no doubt. Very cool. Hey, tell me about the canoe, man. It's the coolest project. I heard you talking to someone last couple episodes ago. You were talking about it.
Yeah. My son and I are building a canoe. Something I wanted to do. I was spending some time on the lake last year, and I was sitting around on a like a plastic kayak. It's nice, but you know, it's one of these like plastic kayaks, and I'm like, man, wouldn't this be so much cooler if I was sitting in my own canoe with my son? And so I bought the parts and bought the equipment and I'm in the process of buying the tools, and in fact, that's what I'm going to do this afternoon is go downstairs. Said that earlier. I'm going to go downstairs and work on the canoe, and we're starting to put the cedar strips on. So it's actually cool to see it start coming together. It's very nice. It's fun.
When you're on that lake and you're like, I built this with my own hands, right? It's kind of like when you eat a meal that you like hunted. You know, you went on a hunt and I killed that. I know what it was. It didn't suffer. It didn't come from whatever. There's something about that, right? Yeah. And you're bonding with your
really
son.
Excited about it.
Win-win.
Oh, totally.
I mean, fantastic.
Yeah, we're learning and we're growing and we're connecting together, and so that's a great way to do it, especially among men. You know, around an activity, and then we can have conversations about drugs and pornography and girls and success and failure and goal setting, all because we're building a canoe, and I've created the space and margin to have these types of conversations.
Yeah, and you touched on something right there too. I remember talking to a therapist a while ago. You know, a lot of the folks I interview on the podcast are PhDs, and they're of the psychological sort of nature and social type stuff. And he mentioned one thing. You know, when men talk, they need to be doing something while they're talking, right? So you and your son, you're doing something, but you're also bonding. If you're just sitting here talking, obviously we're doing that, but this is a different platform. But if you're just sitting there talking to your son, okay, I need to talk to you, son, about X, Y, and Z. It doesn't really work. Like we don't like that. Like I don't. I know I don't.
Right.
And so it totally resonates. Women could just sit there and the whole point is talking, and that's the point, and they do it so well. Men, it's like, dude, could we just build, like, just do something? That's why even having a beer.
I think generally. Yeah, I think the difference is, I'm just speaking in generalities here. I think women are relational and men are more confrontational. So in order to form a bond with another man, there needs to be a common objective that we confront or a common enemy that we confront. So when men work together, it's shoulder to shoulder, right? When women work together, it's face to face. Relational, shoulder to shoulder for men, facing out, confrontational. I think that's one of the big differences between men and women generally. I know some confrontational women, and I know some relational men. It isn't universal, but generally speaking, I think that's
I like
that's
that,
a
shoulder
difference.
to shoulder versus facing. That's a neat little like a visual.
It's how we work. That's why, you know, when guys get together, what do? We always find something to compete against, right? Even though, like you just said, having a beer. Yeah, you maybe can have a beer, but then you're going to turn something into a contest. Who can drink the most beers, or you know, who can swim across the pool the fastest, or whatever. We create the dumbest little competitions because we like to confront those obstacles.
Right. Even some visual popped in my head though. Even when you're having a beer with a guy, you usually sit at a bar. So to your analogy, you're shoulder to shoulder. You're not facing each other.
Right, shoulder to shoulder. And what are you doing? You're watching the game, which is by definition confrontation.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Well, Ryan, this was awesome, man. I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate your time. I know you're super busy. Dude, have fun with that canoe. Enjoy the time with your son. I think you're doing amazing stuff, man. Keep up. You know, I love people like you. No, I'm not blowing sunshine on people out here. So just keep it up, and I wish you the best, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Vinny. Appreciate the opportunity. Great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thanks, dude.